I think hierarchy is a really great example. I'm also curious as to like the limitations within networks. I'd love to hear about that. But can we talk about hierarchy for a minute? Because it's the one thing that I get often called here at NPQ, Nonprofit Quarterly. I get a lot of calls, people asking for alternatives to it. And then I just as much, I get so much almost like people in power that are in a hierarchy almost rebuff that. Like it's such a thing that people are just like, oh, like I don't know what these people think they're going to do. I mean, how otherwise would we organize ourselves for scale or for whatever, So I also have been thinking a lot about this. And I started to research hierarchy and found a lot of the good things about it, right? That it holds complexity, that it holds, that nature replicates it in a way that allows for a certain kind of, that there's some kind of way that it holds more, right? That's kind of like the main thing about it. It can hold more because there's a logic to it that allows you to bunch more things together, which is just how our brain works, right? So like you can't design against the brain right now. I don't think so anyway. So I think that's really fascinating. And then I had a really interesting conversation a few weeks ago with a hierarchy engineer. And I was so fascinated by the fact that he existed. I didn't even know that was a thing. So he shared with me just this whole other aspect of hierarchy. And what he does is say, he goes into systems and fixes them. He says that what we have mostly is dysfunctional hierarchies. Because what a hierarchy is actually supposed to do is each layer is supposed to hold more complexity than the layer below and to interpret it for the layer below. And if it can't do that, then it becomes dysfunctional, right? If the layer below, or people, say if you're in an organization, you're below, and you have more ability to hold complexity than the layer above, which is almost like the normal nonprofit right now, right? Where you have a lot of leaders of color, a lot of people that are really connected to the field, and you have mostly white leaders still and boards. And there's just such a tension around that. It's getting called, like we need something beyond hierarchy. But I thought it fascinating that we don't even look at what it's supposed to do. And even if it was working well, the fact that even if we just arranged it, because we actually, and this is what's so controversial about this particular line of thinking, I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, but what this author who writes about hierarchy like this, which I can find his book, I have it somewhere around here, but he talks about that you'll never have equality because people have different abilities to hold complexity. And that in fact, and I've had other people talk to me about this as well, that there is a way that hierarchy, we talk about it in terms of power, but that another way of thinking about it is in terms of mastery. You do actually want people that have a certain ability to be at the, at some point where it merits, right? Like it helps the whole, right?
As you talk, I feel like I've got all these thoughts, and some of them are, fear. It's like, let's not embrace, right? There's a danger there, right? And so presumably we all have some of that too. And so how do we even think a thought that feels intrinsically dangerous?
Right.
And that's okay. I mean, I think these are places.
I feel that too.
But yeah, right. So just to acknowledge that this is scary stuff. Part of the problem with hierarchies is that they feed on each other, right? So we have gender hierarchy, a race hierarchy, a wealth hierarchy, and then also an institutional power hierarchy. And look, they look the same, right? Like the people at the top look like the white, straight, male, wealthy people, right? Like this isn't an accident. The hierarchies are supporting one another, right? But we can kind of deplete or address the injustice of hierarchies while preserving some of the things that they do well by introducing other forms. And so one of my favorites, which is a little different from what you're saying, Cyndi, but maybe we could think about it together, is rotating positions, right? So I feel like I don't know whether I can hold complexity until I've been in that position, right? Like, who knows who's good at this thing, right? And if we decide, oh, well, so-and-so who happens to belong to all the majority groups happens to be really good at holding complexity, right? Then we're reinforcing all the hierarchies all at once. We're allowing them to sediment each other. But what if we all try this? And I'm an educator too, so I feel like, what about learning about complexity? Like, how do we introduce people to complexities that they might not be automatically skilled at, but we can help them to learn? So thinking about, like, in organizations, how do you rotate people through positions where they can get some sense of the complexity that the organization represents? And to me, that's incredibly important to understanding power too, because I find, like, I'm in I'm in an organization that's a university. It's really a complex organization in lots of ways. But the people who don't participate in the administration of the university assume a really simple power hierarchy, right? They believe the president is more powerful than the dean, who's more powerful than the professor, who's more powerful than the student. But actually, power doesn't work quite that way. It works like I'm constrained in all kinds of ways by other forms, right? I can't, much as I might like to make my colleagues teach at 7 a.m, I can't, right? Like there are rules about that, right? So how does power actually operate through these multiple forms? And the higher you go in the institution, the more you can see of those different forms and the way that they're working. So could we help people develop the methods for holding complexity? Like, could that be a training or a way of thinking? And that's where I think, oh yeah, we've got the skills for that in the arts. We know how to do that kind of analysis.